Welcome to CSIS Online. The way we bring you events is changing, but we'll still present live analysis and award-winning digital media from our Dracopoulos Ideas Lab. All on your time, live or on demand. This is CSIS Online.
Well, good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening. My name is Scott Kennedy. I'm the Trustee Chair in Chinese Business and Economics at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. And I'm delighted to invite you to this program today to talk about Chinese reactions to the very important speech that U.S. Trade Representative Katherine Tai made yesterday at CSIS, where she unveiled the Biden administration's policies with regard to the U.S.-China bilateral economic relationship. This was a highly publicized speech. Many in Washington and elsewhere around the world were looking forward to her remarks. And although she may have disappointed some people in some ways, this is the first time the administration laid out a relatively clear strategy about why we have a relationship with China, the kinds of problems we have, and how we're going to go about trying to address them. And she announced that the US and China would begin soon having dialogues, she with her counterpart, and that the US also would begin to reintroduce the exclusion process for tariffs that were imposed during the Trump administration against China. All of us in Washington yesterday, after the speech, were talking about it. But one of the things that exists now is the infrequent opportunities to hear Chinese voices about our bilateral relationship. And so luckily, I've been able to have two of my close friends from Beijing join us. These are two leading authorities on Chinese economic policy, US-China commercial relations, and China's role in the WTO. Wang Yong is director of the Institute of International Political Economy and the Center for American Studies at Peking University. Tu Xinquan is dean of the China Institute for WTO Studies at the University of International Business and Economics. More importantly to me, they are close friends and also former hosts of me when I've been in China. When I was on a Fulbright in 2008 and 2009, Wang Yong was kind enough to host me for that year, and I learned a tremendous amount during that time in China. It was in the middle of the financial crisis. And from 2011 to 2013, when I was a professor at Indiana University and opened a research center in Beijing, we opened it in Tu Xinquan's institute at UIBE. They have been very kind to me, and I hope all of us will be kind to them today, particularly because we are interrupting their vacation. This is a week for China's National Day vacation, and neither of them are in Beijing. Wang Yong is coming to us from his family's home in Anhui, and Tu Xinquan from his family's home in Hangzhou. And they have been kind enough to take this time to talk with us. So Xinquan and Wang Yong, thank you for being with us and everyone today.
Yeah, hello everyone. Yeah, I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you for your invitation, Scott.
Sure. What I'd like to do now is, because we only have 30 minutes for this program, is I've got a few initial questions I wanted to ask. And we have a very good group of audience members that are growing by the second, who will probably also have a few questions that I want to also see if we have a little bit of time to get to. But I didn't want to keep this a long program because I want you all to enjoy your vacation. So let me just begin with the most obvious question, and let's start with Xinquan, if we could, and then turn to Wang Yong for his as well. And just your initial reaction to the speech, and what you thought the purpose of the speech was, what you heard, what you think Beijing, the Chinese government, heard from that speech. And why don't we just start there, and then we can go to the next issues that follow up from your remarks. Xinquan?
Okay, thank you. I think actually the world has been waiting for this kind of speech or policy statement for a long time, for now 9 or 10 months. The Biden administration has said that it has been reviewing the U.S.-China trade relationship, but as I said, we're waiting for the results. So this time, I think Ambassador Tai is giving us this answer about the results of the review. And I think, generally speaking, my impression is positive about her remarks and statement. Especially, she does not support decoupling. I think it's a very great concern for China. And she used the word like durable coexistence and recouple. These words are kind of new, but basically I think they are positive for the U.S.-China trade relationship. And also she mentioned the possible tariff exclusion process. It has been long expected and waited also. So if this could be started soon, then it would be good for both Chinese exporters, importers, and also for U.S. companies. So as I said, basically, my impression is positive.
Well, thank you very much. Wang Yong, did you come away with the same kind of reaction to the speech, or did you see things a little bit differently?
Yeah. Thank you, Scott, for your invitation. I share the tones as expressed by Xinquan. I'm speaking, from the position of a scholar, right? I think Chinese scholar. We're studying, the issue, the issue U.S.-China the trade relations for quite a long time. I would like, first of all, I'd like to give some credit to Ambassador Tai's speech. She recognized the value of the U.S.-China commercial relations. That's not to benefit the people of the U.S. and China, but also the global economy. And the two sides have the special responsibility for the global economy. So I think that is definitely true, right? So both sides has as large as 600 billion US dollars, in trade. That I think that is the more than any bilateral trade relations in the histories. So I think that's the values, that's the common interests of the people. I'm happy, and she's speech, her speech, recognize that. Secondly, as pointed by, Xinquan, and didn't call for the one more the tariff war or the trade war, right? And not to call for a decoupling, right? Rather than a recoupling, recouple. So I think that's important. That is positive. That is practical and realistic, right? So I think that is should be encouraged. And thirdly, I think she is very right in the try to conduct the dialogue with the Chinese counterparts to settle these differences of interests and positions. I think that's positive. So I think based on these points, and I think that she will get to the positive and reactions from the Chinese side. About the differences, I would like to remind Okay, that it talked about the issue of the phase one agreement. I think it's very important to recognize the impact of pandemic and I think the undercapacity, underproductions, as well as the rising the cost of cargo between the two countries. So that all these factors, very unfortunately, influence the implementations of the phase one agreements. Secondly, both sides, they have the different, the economic, the system. It's very natural, to see the differences in the economic governance, right? So I think that is we should give more the patience and respect to the differences of economic the systems, right? So I think on the course, both sides should need to talk and work out the differences based on the WTO rules. So the U.S. side might have its own expectation, and the Chinese side has expectations, but both sides should respect the WTO and the international norms to settle the problem. Thirdly, I think I would like to argue that both sides should depoliticize or desecuritize the trade issue. That's very important. Right. So I think, unfortunately, over the last several years, we have seen the political intervention. There's too much, the considerations of national security into this very important commercial relations, and both sides, should resist the temptation of the maneuvering, like that. So, generally speaking, I'm cautiously, about the directions. Of the U.S.-China commercial relations, that is, there might and Tai's speech may imply some of them, and I think very important speech.
Well, thank you very much, both of you, for those opening remarks in reaction. I would say that counts as glass half full, or maybe even glass 3/4 full, positive things. Wang Yong, you touched upon this a little bit, but I would like to get your reaction as well as Xinquan's, because there are a couple things that she said, which, even though in the short term looks like a reduction of tensions and an increase of dialogue, she also suggested some things where there are some longer term problems and maybe a resumption eventually of escalation. So she highlighted what she called China's state-centered economic system. She didn't use the word state capitalism. Mm-hmm. And she talked about the steel industry and other sectors that she's worried about that create overcapacity, and the inability to have these resolved through WTO cases in a meaningful way. Again, her views, when she was asked about different things that she might do, or the Biden administration might do, she was clear to say nothing is off the table, including, people asked about, Section 301 investigations or other kinds of things that the U.S. may do. Those seem, I don't know, is your impression that those seem like less, that her analysis is okay because we can just sort of, agree to disagree about economic systems, and that mm-hmm. it's unlikely she will use those kind of tools? Or should we be worried that the framing that she used and the possibility of these tools means that the relationship is still going to mm-hmm. Have a lot of conflict in it? Yong?
Hey, Scott, I think you raised a very important, the question about the U.S.-China, right? So I think that is, as I said, it's very natural. For the both the systems are different from each other. Both sides has a different historical background, the different the stages of development, right? So the very natural. I think the most important approach to the differences between the two is to conduct the honest and open dialogue, You might have noticed, okay, in the last several years, even with the time of the trade war or tariff war, China has adopted many unilateral, the market opening measures. That is very important. More recently, the Chinese government decided to apply for the membership of the CPTPP. So that is a high level, the high standard, the market opening, and the deal. Okay, the regional arrangement, right? China also reached the deal, with the EU on the comprehensive investment terms, right? All this, when you put all these things together, we also see China would like it to continue the market open, right? To open the Chinese markets, which is more important, okay, to the other the countries. I believe, by the end of this year, China might release a very important political document to summarize the experience of reform and opening up. I believe the market, will be celebrated as playing the vital role in distributions. So that is very fundamental. The things I hope our American friends should pay attention to it. Give some credit as well.
Thank you. I would say, sitting in Washington, D.C. and reading Chinese official media and speeches and watching news about the situation of Chinese private companies and things, one doesn't get the impression, again, sitting in Washington, that China's reform and opening is accelerating. It seems a little bit different from here, but that's why we're having this conversation. Xinquan, tell us a little bit more about your thoughts about maybe some of these other elements of Katherine Tai's speech, and given your role at UIBE, some of your thoughts about TPP and the WTO.
Okay, thank you. Actually, as I said, my general impression or reaction to her speech is positive. But I think there is one shortcoming in her speech, which is that the lack of reference to rules, because the US has been advocating the so-called rules-based trading system. But her speech didn't talk about much about that. Of course, bilateral conversations and dialogues are important, but we need a benchmark to make some judgment. So otherwise, for example, after a couple of times of conversations, and finally the US government is not satisfied with the results, then the US government will use Section 301 again. So then what's the good of this conversation? But as we think, Section 301 is not consistent with WTO rules. So I think, especially for such two powerful economies, international rules are even more important because the two sides have the capability to hurt each other. So if we can have same set of rules, we follow the same set of rules, then it would be easier to deal with the conflicts between each other. And with regard to the so-called state interventions, of course, it has been a long time debate about this issue. But I think at least in recent years, the role of the state has become more and more important in many economies, not only in China, I think even in the United States. And also from her speech, Ambassador Tai also mentioned that the US will increase its investments in a lot of infrastructure or education or people's lives, whatever. So I think we should not kind of demonize the role of state in the economy. And actually, also in the event of the pandemic, we also see that the state could play and should play a very important role, not only economic development, but also in social development, social governance. So, and also you can see also under the Biden administration, the role of the importance of industrial policies also has been rising. Like in the semiconductor industry, as she mentioned, the U.S. government will invest $50 billion US, I think, in this industry to increase its manufacturing basis, to improve its manufacturing basis. But actually, in the at least in the case of semiconductor industry, the U.S. is highly more competitive than any other economies, including China. China is at a very low level yet. So I mean, then with regard to these debates or discussions about industrial policies, we still should stick to the existing rules. But of course, I don't oppose the reform of WTO. But to reform the WTO, we need more discussions, and especially more multilateral discussions about these rules. Otherwise, these rules are not legitimate enough to persuade or to force economies, including China, to follow them. So anyway, I would like to emphasize the role of rules, not only the conversations, bilateral conversations and the dialogues.
That's super helpful. Thank you very much, Xinquan. I was just curious, what do you all expect in the very near short term? Do you expect Vice Premier Liu He or and the Minister of Commerce or others to start having publicizing forthcoming talks with Ambassador Tai, or other types of initiatives? Where do you think this is heading? Do you think it's possible we may see Biden, President Biden and President Xi have more conversations, perhaps in person, maybe at the G20 in Rome? What do you think is going to happen in the next few weeks or months?
Yeah. I think we can expect more high-level interaction and changes between the two governments and the leaders as well. Right? So you might remember the political leaders had the telephone conversation. From what I heard, the atmosphere of the conversation and dialogue was quite positive. Right? That might be different from what we have read, in the newspaper. Right? So that is something. And we also say, okay, that is the settlement of Meng Wanzhou's case, right? So I think all these positive things. Now they have some the media report. Okay, the Chinese Politburo and member of the Politburo, Mr. Yang Jiechi, and the Mr. Sullivan. He might have the chance to meet with each other in Switzerland, in Europe, right? We can put all these things together. I think we'll be not surprised to say both sides send the high-level the officials to talk to each other, to come to the lines of the dialogue. So that I hope by taking advantage of these chances and meetings, the two governments can resume the strategic dialogue as well as macroeconomic, policy dialogue, as well as the commercial dialogue. Right? So I think beside that, of course, a very important field is in the military. Okay, that is to find ways to avoid the confrontation in the air and in the maritime fields. That is very important to both of us. Yeah, so I think I'm cautiously optimistic about the near the future directions of the U.S.-China relations. In the field of the commercial relations, I expect Mr. Liu He, Ms. Tai, the Yellen, I might have the conversation. So, Scott.
That's interesting. Interesting. Of course, it takes, as folks here in Washington like to say, it takes two to tango. It takes two to dance. So if the U.S. is showing good faith in extending an olive branch, China needs to as well on economic and security issues. There have been a lot of reports lately about Chinese military aircraft flying off the southeast coast in and around near Taiwan. So there's a lot that both sides can do. I was wondering, in terms of tariffs, the U.S. is announcing resuming this exclusion process. Does China have a similar kind of exclusion process that it is extending to Chinese importers of American products?
Yes, yes, I think so. Actually, I think in early this year, I also joined some kind of discussions about this topic. We thought that the pragmatic way to solve the tariff issue is to speed up the exclusion process in both countries. So as I know, actually, maybe there have been already some dialogues between the two governments about this issue. But we Chinese tend to pay more attention to the general atmosphere or the broader background. So I think the recent conversation, the recent call between the two presidents set a good basis for the bureaucrats to push forward the process. So I think as long as the two sides, especially like Liu He, Vice President Liu He and Ambassador Tai could have some dialogue or conversations recently, then the two sides could, as I said, could start and speed up the exclusion process individually, respectively. They are not, they don't have to be related, but
yes,
they could do this simultaneously.
Let me ask one other question. We're near the end. The Phase 1 agreement calls for specific levels of Chinese imports of American products for 2020-21, but it also says it expects the trajectory of Chinese imports to continue from 2022 to 2025. If the United States were to ask China to set new specific quantitative targets for imports in these different four categories, do you think that's something that the Chinese would look forward to accepting, to set those targets? Or do you think they hope to get beyond these first 2 years of quantitative targets and not have targets in the future?
Scott, yes. I think this is a very, might be the difficult part, of the talk. If there is some talk after Tai's the speech. Right, so that is one thing I would like to say. The Phase 1 of the tariff imposition is not a good idea, right? So that is the first of all that against the WTO rules, against the spirit of the free trade, and secondly, the last 2 years, right? So I think we have seen the cost much more to the Americans, importers and consumers than to the Chinese manufacturers, right? So the U.S. suffer the most of the tariff burden, right? So that is why they comes to the U.S. government ask for the tariff exclusion, right? So so that is something. Okay, we should be noted that that's not a good idea. And the third, so I think the last point I would like to argue that I think the almost impossible to say. Okay, such a kind of extraordinary arrangement will continue. Okay, that's not a good idea. Not good idea to the U.S., China, not a good idea to the whole global economy.
Well, Xinquan and
Okay.
Wang Yong,
Yeah, okay.
you've been
Yeah,
very.
just,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
very short. Yeah. Anyway, I think managed trade is not so market oriented. So I think, and also that language is not so legal. It's more like economist prediction. So I don't think that's so mandatory requirements.
Yeah.
I think it's still subject to further negotiations or further dialogues.
That's exactly what the ambassador said yesterday, that these weren't specific mentions, but it's something that the two sides will definitely need to discuss. Xinquan, Wang Yong, you've been very generous with your time taking away from your vacation. I hope that you've benefited from this. I hope that we can talk again soon because U.S.-China relations, as Wang Yong said, are important not only for our two economies, but for the global economy. And there's much more issues that we need to discuss and that will come up in the coming months and years. So thank you. Thank our audience for joining and asking good questions. I hope I was able to paraphrase some of them well. To the CSIS team and the trustee chair and the broadcast team, thank you for your good work. And we look forward to continuing this discussion in the future. Hope everybody has a good day, afternoon, or evening, wherever you find yourself. Take care.